This is CheloniaCast episode 71. Today we're joined by Dr. Fred Caporaso, who is a professor of food science at Chapman University and also involved with the honors program there. Dr. Caporaso has a long history and involvement with turtle conservation and adventures and all across the board. We're really excited to talk to him today about a lot of those things, so thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Really like what you're doing.
Thanks.
All right, so to kick things off, as we typically do, we like to start things off with one simple question. Why turtles?
You know, I thought about that for most of my life. People ask me that question all the time, but I think it's probably the same for a lot of people. When I went back afterwards, the first 3 years of my life, we lived with my grandparents in a brownstone building in Jersey City. Very narrow backyard, all cement. The guy next door had this dollhouse out there, he made one, and there were box turtles in it. And I didn't think about that until probably after college, that maybe that had a little bit of impact. But the reality was, everywhere I've lived, there have been turtles nearby. But that probably, I don't know, it's either that or just a genetic defect. I don't, I think we moved to Chelonia, New Jersey when I was 8, and less than a half mile from my house there was woods, and the Rahway River ran through there, and there was a pond, and it was called Turtle Pond. And as a kid, I used to wander around there. We saw painted turtles basking in the middle of it, never could get near them. But, you know, I didn't plan that, and so that was sort of serendipitous. But I'd find box turtles in the woods and bring them home, and, you know, that kind of thing. So that's probably why. And I could say even follow through my first job after going to school at New Jersey at Rutgers and then Penn State for a PhD. I went to University of Nebraska, and the first week my kids found a turtle walking down the street in the middle of Lincoln, Nebraska on 33rd Street. That would give you an idea. It's not a rural area, but a painted turtle. So they follow me wherever I go. That's the deal. I don't know. Just serendipitous.
That's cool that the turtles come to you to some extent.
Every time I moved, I would give my animals away, and short period of time, something would show up. And of course, the last time when I moved to California, right before I moved to California, took a job here, this new magazine came out called Turtles. It had one issue. I don't know if you guys have that kind of in your memory banks, but in the issue, they had this description of this guy, Walter Allen, who had, well, he had a picture of his Hillary, and he in his backyard, and talked about him, and he was in Southern California. So as soon as I moved here, I moved to Orange County, I looked him up. He lived 14 miles from my house. He had 3 houses and 800 turtles, better than any zoo anywhere. He separated them by species, except for a lot of aquatics. He had a big, huge pond. And he did school kids tours 6 days a week. He had staff of 6. So I was living the life. I couldn't believe that there's a turtle guy as soon as I got here. So even in California. So again, serendipitous, it was there, and we developed a friendship. Part of his interest was the fact that he'd like to go to Las Vegas, but he needed somebody to watch the house when he left. His wife wouldn't have anything to do with the turtles. She lived in a separate house. They had 3 properties, and so I'd watch the house and feed the animals when he was gone. Sort of didn't have to do much feeding. Usually gone for the weekend, but not major. But you know, this is like, wow, how could the guy's got Spengler eye. I never saw him before. He's got all these things I've never seen before, and so we developed a friendship, and that lasted until he passed. So he became one of those people that was important. And of course, I met through that Peter Pritchard, because Walter invited him to give a talk to the California Turtle and Tortoise Club. And of all places, they held it in, what was that called? The Velvet Turtle, a restaurant in Long Beach. And Sybil came with him, and I met Peter then, and we just hit it off, and went from there. I don't know how far you want me to go, but then Peter had this idea in the back of his mind. None of us knew it. He wanted to do this film, Turtle Planet, and he came and talked there several times with Walter, and then he said to Walter, I'd like to take some people on a tour of Costa Rica, see the turtles of Costa Rica. You want to do that, Walter? And he said, yeah. And they had everything set up with a travel agent in Florida. And the travel agent said if he could get 15 people, Peter goes free. So Walter says, I can get 15 people. Well, when he tried, wound up, I asked my wife, and she says, yeah, you can go. I'd never left the country. And so I signed up, and it turns out there were only 6 of us. And so they were going to cancel. And so Walter says, you should bring your wife. Now, my wife is a financial planner. She was accounting for 17 years before she did that. She's an animal lover, but she never had a turtle. She had cats and dogs. But so she said she'd go, which amazed me. And what happened was they decided that they'd cut corners on some things on the trip because we couldn't have 15 people, we couldn't go first class. And Peter, you probably talk with some people, Peter sometimes could be, that's okay with him. He'd sleep on a bed of nails if there were turtles in the other room. So we went on a trip, and that was the first time in 1984. And that was quite the deal. So, and of course, that subsequently I did this article called Indiana Pritchard and the Dinghy of Doom, which was based on Indiana Pritchard coming out in the theaters in June, and we went in November to Costa Rica, and some of the trip was quite dynamic. We'll get into that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome just place to start. But I mean, in terms of, we always like to explore. We'll definitely get into all of that. But I'm curious because you have an interest in profession in food science and that sort of thing, and we've had a lot of people on that have different areas of interest and that sort of thing. And I think you've kind of merged those two at times.
Right.
And I'm curious, where did that other interest develop, and how have you brought that together with turtles?
Okay, so first, I'll just tell you, I wasn't ready for college when I went to college. I was ready for going to fraternity parties. I never had to study in high school. I was good in the sciences, and my folks thought I should be a doctor. So I went, well, I don't know, but I'll be a veterinarian. So I started off in biology and proceeded to spend more time. I was majoring in partying and minoring in the rest of life. And needless to say, that didn't work out very well. What happened was I sort of righted myself. I wound up getting married early, and then it was really time to be serious. And I applied to vet school and didn't get in. In New Jersey, it doesn't have vet school. The states that have vet schools are required to take 80% of their students from that state because it's a state-run institution. And the other 20% they get from the rest of the world. And most of the veterinary schools only have contracts with states near them. And so the 2 schools that would accept New Jersey students were University of Pennsylvania and Cornell. Probably the 2 toughest to get into, which didn't help my chances. So I started looking for jobs when I was graduating, and I did an interview with Campbell Soup, which was in New Jersey. And the guy says, with the things you're interested, because he's asking, he says, you need to go to graduate school. You shouldn't, should do some graduate program. And I wound up getting a scholarship in food science. I was doing muscle foods at that time, chemistry and biochemistry of muscle. But, there were jobs at the end of that. And then after I finished my master's, I got offered a position, graduate student stipend and assistantship at Penn State to continue in food science. And I did. And then I was more focused on career and wound up getting a job at the University of Nebraska as a faculty member in food science. And when I got there, they had a lot of money for food science, and being a big ag state, especially muscle foods, my career took off and I got into the sensory. They wanted me to do what you'd call taste panels because nobody else wanted to do that. And I was doing a lot of sensory with meat products, and it just took off. And again, when I was in Nebraska and Pennsylvania, turtles wound up coming into the yard and into my life at the same time. So it was working out. So I was just focused on career, and food science worked out really well for me. There are jobs at the end of the tunnel there. And I found out I don't know that I would have been a good veterinarian because I did surgery on animals in graduate school in animal physiology. In those days, you didn't use computers. You actually, we'd have to put down rabbits and rats and other things. Didn't enjoy that part of it very much, and so I wasn't thinking I'd be a good vet anyway. So it worked out, and I, got involved with the scientific society. Was the president, like you guys, go-getters and interested in high, energy and want to do things. I became the president of the Food Science Club. Then as president of the Food Science Club, I got sent to a meeting in Purdue to, meet with other students in food science, and I became national officer in the scientific society as a student.
Wow.
So it went from there, and then a first job. So that should be enough. But the turtles always came back.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I think that maybe we could just pick up on what you were talking about, the Costa Rica expedition with Dr. Pritchard, and just kind of what that was like, and maybe where the Dinghy of Doom part comes into the story.
Yeah. Okay. And tell me if I'm going too long. But
no, it's good. We like it.
But basically, it's kind of interesting with travel. I'm bringing my wife with me in this, and in those days, she was worried about curling irons. I mean, she had like 2 steamer trunks. It was our luggage. It was like all this stuff. And we got there, and she didn't realize that we didn't need adapters. She brought adapters, and her curling iron and our blow dryer didn't work, so she didn't use them for the rest of the trip. But Peter took us everywhere, and we mostly did it on shoestring.
It seems consistent.
We took a bus. We took a bus to one place. It was so hysterical. Across Costa Rica, and what happened was, I'm trying to remember, what did we have? We had something that was, I know, I stayed with the luggage. The bus driver drove for about 3 hours, and then they took a stop so he could use the restroom and everybody else could. So I said I'd stay on the bus with the luggage while everybody else used the restroom. And as soon as they started to get back on the bus driver got on, and I couldn't get off. So I'm like, oh my goodness. So it was a rough trip for me, but anyway, but we did some neat things. We were in a place called Tamarindo. We saw leatherback sea turtles nesting, and Peter and I wandered the beach early in the morning because we slept on the beach. That's the other thing that he would do. You just stay out on the beach all night, and when the sun comes up, it's kind of hard to stay sleeping. So I got up and we walked the beach, and there was a lot of debris because it depends on the current. There's so much floating crap in the ocean. All this plastic and stuff would come in, and what happened was these baby leatherbacks were trapped in that stuff. It was like a dam right on the shore. And Peter, also sort of as an aside, he always did this. He'd collect baby doll parts that would show up in the debris because
Yeah,
the
I
plastic was
remember
running.
seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he made him into whatever mobiles in his atrium at home. You probably saw
We
something.
saw,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, so he would do that kind of stuff. He'd pick up stuff and bring it home no matter what. So that was good. We also went to Tortuguero, which was pretty wild also because that's on the Atlantic side, and on the Atlantic side, we didn't really have a boat, but to go from Limon to Tortuguero is a 8-hour boat ride up a canal. They built a canal along the coast. So we're waiting for the boat, and the boat shows up. It has no seats in it. It's just like this hollowed out log, and they're cutting planks for us to sit on for this boat ride. And it was like the boat ride from hell. But that was kind of what Peter did, and we did, Tortuguero, and it was unbelievable. Saw green sea turtles, and he did some neat stuff there. He talked the locals into policing the beach for him, and he made a negotiation with them so that they wouldn't eat all the turtles and kill all the turtles, is that they could take so many turtles a week, how many they wanted, and if they would turn over all the turtles so that the scientists could come in the morning and tag them and turn them over and let them go back into the ocean. But they would mark on the plastron an X of the ones that they wanted. And so that worked out because when they try to do it with guards or policemen, the locals just wait till the police go to sleep or they go home. And then, so it wasn't working out. So, he did that. It was great. But anyway, so we did that, and we took an airplane back off the beach on a grass runway, which was quite an experience. But back to San Jose, it was good. But the big thing was the trip to see the Aribada in Nancite, which is a beach that's in Santa Rosa National Park. It's on the coast, the Pacific coast, and almost at the border of Nicaragua. And we were supposed to drive there, but we couldn't drive there because there had been torrential rains, and you couldn't get in even with a four-wheel drive vehicle. So they said we had to go by boat. And so we're sitting in this place in Coco, this little harbor that's there, and Peter's negotiating for the boat with this guy from University of Costa Rica, who was our sort of on-land guide. And I just was I probably told you this already, but one of the women who was with us was 70-year-old woman from Pasadena that was just into turtles and wanted to go. And she says to me, "Is that our boat, or is that the boat to take us to the boat?" Because there are big boats in the harbor. And it was a 16-foot dinghy, and that was our boat with a 25 horsepower motor. And the boatman and his son went, and then there were 7 of us, plus all of our luggage. And we took off out of Coco, and again, Peter wasn't transmitting a lot of this stuff, which is probably better, because probably my wife was, I don't know, she just liked Peter and trusted everything he was doing, at least at that first trip. So we took off, and we got out to sea because it's a 3.5-hour open ocean voyage, and we start taking on water. We're being splashed. The sea's a little bit rough. So the boatman says we're going to pull in at this place, and it's called Bahia Huevos, which is Egg Beach. And they decided that the seas were too rough, and of course we were all soaked, and that we stay here overnight and start in the morning because the boatman said it would be calmer. So we stayed there. He gave us a fish, which we cooked on the oar of the boat. When the sun went down, that was it. It was just howler monkeys. And I don't know if you've ever been around a howler monkey, but it's especially when it's dark and you know you're basically with a jungle there that has jaguars and a few other things. The peccaries are very, very dangerous too. I was just too naive to be scared, but we made it through the night and headed out the next day, and it was calmer, and we made it to Nancite, and we arrived there maybe, I don't know, 9 in the morning, and it looks like a war zone. It looks like somebody who had, I don't know what you call those, four-wheel drive vehicles on the beach, but it looked like tractor tracks everywhere, but it was sea turtle tracks. There were that many. And so 50,000 sea turtles had nested on this 1 kilometer beach the night before, the night we were supposed to be there. But they said, don't worry, there'll be more tonight. So that night we got some sleep early, and then at midnight we got up. And the sleeping, we were supposed to have the wardens, we didn't have to bring these. Peter says, no sleeping bags, they're going to have to supply everything. Well, they supplied nothing. My wife and I, we had a room to ourselves that had 300 turtle skulls in it and was about the size of a big closet, and we were laying on the floor, and then other people were in other parts of the cabins. And we got up, late at night, as soon as the Arabada was about to start, and we went out there with some of the park wardens, and there were 35,000 sea turtles that nested there that one night. And I can't even describe it to you. I have some pictures. They don't do it justice, but they do transects. They do sections, 10-meter squares in different parts of the beach, and every hour they count the number of turtles that are in there. And that's how they estimate how many are on the whole beach, because you can't really, you're not actually counting 35,000. But they dig up each other's nests because there's more eggs. In the 3 days they estimated they laid 11 million eggs on a 1 kilometer beach. So it's just unbelievable. But fantastic. Everything was good. We're all high-fiving, sleepy. No real showers. And so we were really ripe, but we got back. We were there for 3 days, and we got back on the boat and headed back, and everything was great. We're all laughing it up, and we get about halfway, and the engine fell off the boat. So, and we are maybe a half mile. You could see the beach, and Peter's calm, and we're sort of looking. And the boatman's going, ay, 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 ay. So he gets his fishing line out. He takes his wrench, he wraps it around it to weight it down, and then takes a piece of styrofoam to mark the spot and puts it out. And we're saying, he's never going to get that engine back. I mean, Peter's saying, it's not going to work anyway. The guy got the engine back because we were there the next year. He had his son dive down and get it. It was like 110 feet or 120 feet of water. But it's like, yeah, because so anyway, we don't have an engine. Peter's starting to row, and he's rowing towards shore, but we're going out to sea. So it wasn't really good. So we tried this other strategy. There was a parka, I don't know, he said it was his parka, I was thinking it was my parka, whatever. We had a red parka. We put it on the end of the oar, and we're waving it in the air, any boat that came by, and there weren't too many, but these lobster divers that had a boat about the same size came over, and the boatman talked them into towing us, and they started towing us back, and so it was, everybody was happy again, and probably too naive to be really scared. But as they're towing us, we get to this one section, more than halfway, getting pretty close, and it's called, the area is called Punta Mala, which means bad point, because it's sheer lava cliffs and then lava rock jetting out of the water for about a half mile out. So instead of going completely around that to tow us, they decide to tow us between these lava outcroppings, and the boat line went slack, and our boat crashed on the rocks. And so we are sitting up on the rocks in a 16-foot dinghy, and waves are hitting us. And I'm looking around, there's a 70-year-old woman and a 70-year-old guy who was, a doctor from Canada was with us. And I'm thinking, I don't know who's going to make it, but I was thinking, even if I swam ashore, there was no place to go. It was just lava rock, sheer cliffs. And you could see it if you go on to Google Images. And I did give a talk at TTPG last year, or when was it, November, that had those pictures. But anyway, we made it back. I kissed the ground, and then I had the best hamburger I ever had in my life at the bar that was there in Cocoa when we got back. So it was quite the deal. So anyway, that was the adventure, and my wife still liked Peter. I thought most wives that would be it, but we went on a trip with him again the next year. It's like he's addictive. His energy is contagious. But anyway. Yes, it was, it was so memorable. I started writing the Dinghy of Doom on the plane going home. I had this idea that we should do that, and I published it in just a local newsletter, the California Turtle and Tortoise. But Peter actually referenced it in a sea turtle journal that was on Olive Ridley's. You can look it up. I actually looked it up today. I can't remember, Conservation and Biology of Olive Ridley Sea Turtles. And he did the paper, and he referenced Indiana Pritchard and the Dinghy of Doom. So that's that citation I got. So, but anyway, so that was probably one of the biggest adventures I've ever had. So.
What prompted you to go to the Galapagos? I'm assuming Peter was heavily involved in that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So still, I wasn't aware of it at that time, but 84 is when we went to Costa Rica, and then we went again in 85, and we went again in 88. And Oscar Arias was president. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, and his wife was the Minister of Natural Resources, and we were with Greenpeace. We released some sea turtles and limon, and we were celebrities, and Peter set that all up. So it was really good. But in talking about that, he kept talking about, we could go to some other places, and he had been to Galapagos when you had to go by boat to get out there. It would take a week in a boat to do it. And, that's when he found Lonesome George on Pinta. But he again said he wanted to do this, but he was really talking with Walter because he wanted to do this Turtle Planet, and then it became really evident that he wanted to do filming around the world, and one of the places he thought would be key would be to go to Galapagos, and Walter had been to Galapagos in '72 and wanted to go back, and he said, you guys should go with us, and so we did. And but I didn't let Peter make all the arrangements on that. So he did some stuff with the Darwin station, and he got us in places you can't go to anymore. I mean, basically got carte blanche to go anywhere we wanted to. That's impossible now, and should be impossible. But we got on Pinzone. I didn't even know. I was pretty fit then. I used to run marathons when I was thinner and younger. But that Pinzone is a really, really tough island. Walter never made it to the top where the tortoises were, but I described it as basically a pile of boulders that's 1,300 feet high, and it's 3 miles across, and all the tortoises are on the top in a caldera, and there are only about 100 to maybe 125 old adults, but the rest of us got up there, and we saw Onan, which is considered at that time the oldest animal on Earth by people. You know, they argue about there was a tortoise in Tonga, but I mean, this animal is definitely 180-year plus animal. Its shell was tissue paper thin, and of course, Pinzon tortoises, full grown, are 90 pounds max, so they're very small by comparison. I know I've seen yellowfoot tortoises that were bigger than that, so it was a shock to me to see that type. But all the desert-like islands have those saddlebacks, and that's what they were. So, but anyway, it was fantastic. We saw some repatriated animals there that were grown up at the Darwin Station. What had happened was rats were introduced onto that island in the late 1800s, like 1895, and they go where the moisture is, and that's all in the same place where the tortoises lay the eggs, and so they'd eat all the hatchlings, and so there are no surviving young for over 70 years. Any other animal on Earth, that's it, you're extinct, because, you know, I mean, you know many people many mammals that reproduce after 70? No. And there's many animals that are out there that reproduce after 70? No. Most animals don't even live that long. So it's very unique that giant tortoises have the ability to reproduce and have viable young until they basically die, which is, you know, so exciting to be able to see repatriated animals and the old ones there. And Onan, of course, was blind in one eye and could hardly see out of the other. He had cataracts, so, but he'd chase you around. And again, giant tortoises are not like desert tortoises in California, which butt into each other when they fight. Even Russian tortoises do the same thing. Giant tortoises in Galapagos, they raise up, and the one that raises the highest is the dominant one. The others will back off.
Yeah.
And even in the San Diego Zoo, they have one saddleback there that wasn't the heaviest tortoise, but it dominated because it would always raise its head higher. And every morning they forgot what happened yesterday to start the whole thing over again. It's really interesting. But anyway, so that was one of the highlights for me in Galapagos. But there were many. It's just an unbelievable place to go to. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. Going to Pinzon Island is like my favorite place in the world. So I've always, any hearing all of these stories about Onan and all of the native tortoises ever since I was a kid has just been like captivating. When you spent time there, did you see a lot of other like original tortoises from before the 1800s, or was like Onan, I know, was the oldest and kind of isolated from the others? But
no, we saw them. There weren't too many out. We saw more of the repatriated ones further down, but you know, Linda Coyote was doing research on them. She was from the University of Syracuse University, and they kept track of all of them. So, but I mean, we saw them along the way. We saw some dead animals, carapaces, but Onan was who we were looking for. And as soon as Peter found Onan, you know, we had a National Geographic photographer with us. Alan Deegan, who did the video for the movie of Onan, and where Peter does this dominance thing where he lays down on the ground. So I was right there, but it was one of the highlights of my life. And in fact, that's the center island in the Galapagos, and the English renamed all the islands with English names. Our son, middle name is Duncan, and that's the island. Pinzon is called Duncan by the British. My son's never liked it because he thinks he's being named after Dunkin' Donuts, but anyway, that's his middle name.
That's really cool. Did you see? Because when I went to the Galapagos a couple years ago, I got to see the stone tortoises on Santa Cruz and some of the hybrids they had at the center. But I was just wondering how much you would know about how many of those natives are even left today on Pinzon. Or if they're mostly if most of them are dead by now, and it's just mostly repatriates.
I mean, you know, you'd say most of them are dead because there were 120 just
Yeah.
there on the island. But I really haven't kept track. I know that Onan died
He died in like 1990. like
yeah,
a long
or
time ago.
89 or 90, yeah.
Long before I
So,
was
and we
born.
saw him 86.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I really don't know the answer to that because, you know, they don't let anybody go. I mean,
Yeah.
I know, I support them and I know Wacho, I know the people who are doing the work, but they don't let people,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we can be the best people on, unless we're doing research, we're not going there. They're worried about introducing, you know, disease or a lot of other things that
Yeah.
nobody worried about in those days. It's
Yeah.
much more control. But they're doing such cool things there. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
like Floriana's
Yeah.
is a great example. And then, you know, just great place. And of course, today, you know, they just showed the picture of, you know, on
Yeah.
Espanola, of an Espanola
saw
tortoise,
that.
and that wasn't one of the old ones, but in the surf and on the edge of the island, when they put them all back, they
Yeah.
put them in the center of the island, and you know, they said eventually they'll may make it to where they're tourists, and now they're there. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic too, because they're not going to want people
Yeah.
interacting and put their hands on it, and just, I hate to say it, but most tourists, you know, they're not very trustworthy. Although the guides are there, I see people walking close. The most dangerous animal on land is a female sea lion with pups.
Yeah.
And these people will walk within a foot of them, and they're supposed to stay 6 feet away. And so I can't imagine what will happen with tortoises there.
Yeah,
When,
yeah.
you know, there's less things to fear. And if you have, you know, the guides are also park wardens,
Yeah.
and they could lose their job if somebody does something wrong. So it'll be somewhat controlled, but I'm sure the people at the national park are not happy about the fact that the tortoises made it there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, even from my point of view as somebody that's really young, I envy people that are older, like Pritchard and from that generation, where they had a lot more freedom, at least back in the day. Like now, it's going to be a lot harder for somebody coming up into all of this to even get access to those animals or even just see them or anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but it's, you know, double-edged sword. It's really good to protect their environments and they really need it. But the lack of accessibility can be daunting and frustrating to people that are closer to my age.
Yeah, I think for sure, but I think the trade-off is a good one in that
Yeah.
it's sustainable.
Yeah.
They now have an ecotourism system that is much better than when
Yeah.
I first went there, in that anybody that in this group that we're with, I would feel real comfortable with
Yeah.
getting near them. There are people out there. I mean, my first trip with him, we were snorkeling with hammerheads
Yeah.
and devil's crown, and some French guy grabbed one of them by the tail, and I'm thinking, what the heck are
Yeah,
you thinking? You know, it's like,
People are idiots.
yeah,
That's the problem.
That's the problem. It's like, you know, it's like saying, well, okay, let's not worry about well, whatever, the speed limit. How many people go the speed limit? You know, I mean, on any freeway anywhere. But that's probably not the best example. But where there are people and there's a way for somebody to do something they're not supposed to, they're probably going to try. Somebody is.
Yeah.
You know, they want to get the best picture, and who doesn't? But anyway, I find, I mean, the guide I've had, you know, I had everybody on a trip in January of 24, and we did in the Highlands, the giant tortoises. He
Yeah.
set it up so you can get everybody behind a giant tortoise. Now they're staying way behind it, but
Yeah.
he's taking the pictures and the angle. It looks like I'm just about riding the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, you can still, you
Yeah.
know, you just, those are the trade-offs.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, you know, work for the Darwin station,
Yeah.
and then you could get closer probably.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, and they're never, when I first started going, they would never accept anyone as a volunteer unless they were going to stay there for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
And now they're open to a lot
Yeah.
of different possibilities. So if you're really, really
Yeah.
that motivated and have the time and energy, there probably is a way.
Yeah. Oh, I am. I'll find a way.
Yeah, well,
That's,
Wacho's the guy you need to talk to.
yeah.
Type it.
He was somebody I would think about reaching out for the podcast at some point, but I don't know how much of a language barrier there is. So, if there is one.
His English is a lot better. Whenever I go with Peter, Peter spoke French and Spanish and
Yeah.
English, and they'd speak just in Spanish, and I'd be the dummy guy standing behind him. But I just talked to Wacho, and he let me in, and to places that
Yeah.
other people wouldn't normally. But I'm a donor and all those kinds of things, and he knows me.
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. I understand.
it's a little bit better. But no, it's just a trade-off.
Yeah.
Something about the Galapagos that's really interesting is there's some. I know, Jack, you have the famous tortoise book with all the
Yeah.
individual
Yeah. All the
tortoises.
individuals in it.
And there are a few notable individuals, and Onan is one of those, but the Lonesome George, Diego, and some of the other characters. And you've interacted with, I think, all of them, and I'm just curious what their personalities were like, if
Yeah.
anything, and just what that experience was like.
Heard a good bit about all of them. So it's
Yeah,
good to
so
get
we
some
could
more.
trade. We could trade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I think it's this. They're doing the same thing with Fernanda that they did with Lonesome George when they brought him in. Is they put him in isolation, wouldn't let anybody near him.
Yeah.
In fact, when we went in '86, Peter got us permission to go into the enclosure with
Yeah.
Lonesome George. But Lonesome George was the only tortoise I've ever seen, giant tortoise, that could run with his head in. He just was afraid of people.
Yeah.
It was like, it was, just the guy who was taking care of him, took care of him for 40 years. Other people, he wasn't interested. He was too shy. And Fernandez the same way. I mean, and I don't know if you've ever seen that thing. What is it? Extinct or Alive?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the wardens from the Darwin
Yeah.
station were freaking out when that guy Forrest, whatever his name is, picked the tortoise up and he's jumping around. He's trying to make TV out of it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they're thinking, you're traumatizing an animal that hasn't seen people probably its whole life.
Yeah.
If the Jolly Green Giant reached in this room now and grabbed us out and put us up above the roof, would be filling our pants too.
Yeah.
So there's, I think he was very shy. Diego, not so much. And he was on exhibit all the
Yeah.
time. Everybody walked by and, they said he was a super stud, but, that tortoise went through, I gave the talk. I don't know if you were there that year, I don't know, but at TTPG, but they took him from Galapagos and put him on a boat because there were no planes out there then. So he goes by boat to San Diego.
Yeah.
2 weeks. There's a week to get to the mainland, so 2 weeks, let's say.
Yeah.
Put him into captivity. Now he's an adult,
Mhm.
and he's been on Espanola for X number of years. He's 37 years in San Diego Zoo
Yeah.
in an enclosure, and then they have the All Points Bulletin looking for Espanola tortoises, and the San Diego Zoo decides to send him back, which is great,
Mhm.
right? Because they only had 2 males and 12 females. So that was great for conservation, but that tortoise was then put on a plane and flown back to Ecuador, but put in an enclosure. And he lived at the Darwin station for another 37 years, so he's in captivity. Then now we're talking 74 years.
Yeah.
And then they decided to retire him and put all those big adults back, and he's just been back in the wild for a few years. But what a life.
Yeah.
But again, if you're talking about, if you want bragging rights as a tortoise, I
This is
think
good.
the talk I gave, I said it's the best tortoise story in history, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and they estimate the offspring, he produced about 800 of the 2,000 offspring that
Yeah.
they had. The other males weren't shabby at 600 each, if you do the math.
Yeah.
So, but still, I mean, you know, yeah, he did his job, and
Yeah.
he was not shy. I was with Peter the last time. I was with Peter. What year was that? Oh God, I don't know if I can remember. 2013. We were with. It might have been. Yeah, it was probably 13. No, it might have been even 15. 13 or 15. And I got a picture of him
Yeah.
with Diego, because Diego was right next to the fence, you know, which
Yeah.
is all lava rock. And so I said, Peter, I want to take a picture of the two of you.
Yeah.
And he's sort of looking over the fence, and Diego's got his head up looking at him, so he wasn't afraid of anything.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
totally different from Lonesome George. Now, Onan was even more bizarre.
This is
because well, his name is derived. It's a biblical reference. Onan had unusual, what's the right word? Sexual behavior in the Bible, and Onan did too. He made love to a big rock every day, and spilled his seeds. but if he saw you, like, I mean, when I was there, and it's all sticker bushes around there.
Yeah.
He is got his head up. He's doing the dominance thing, and I'm backing up into these sticker bushes, and he's still coming after me. You know, at first I had trouble getting him aroused, you know, and I got close, and then all of a sudden he started coming after me, and he continued to do that, and Peter was doing that thing with him, you know.
I've seen the footage.
Yeah,
It's
so
amazing.
so he was definitely aggressive. He was definitely the boss in
Yeah.
that area. So even though he was the oldest, I guess he could raise up the most of the ones I saw.
Yeah, yeah.
So unique.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's something just about the Galapagos that's fascinating, and specifically the Duncan project, is that's really the first tortoise or turtle conservation project began. You know, and to see that over the years, I mean, what's it been like to maybe not go back to Duncan necessarily, but to consistently revisit the Galapagos and kind of see the capacity building in real time, and what's been kind of the inspiration story there?
Wow. Yeah, I don't, because this is on video, I'm a little bit afraid. But I would say this is where I cross over from some of my friends who are strict scientists on this, is that when I first went, the Espanola tortoises were together, and they were producing offspring, but they didn't know what to do with them. But at first, they weren't producing very many. Their hatching rates were really bad. The San Diego Zoo built an enclosure for raising hatchlings. I don't know if you have you seen those pictures?
I've seen the
I haven't.
pictures of them.
Yeah, so they've knocked that building down. But what they did is, again, they didn't know enough about the husbandry like a lot of hobbyists do. The floor was made of all cement. They divided it up into sections by islands, so that was good, so that none of the tortoises would intermingle. And in each enclosure, which was about maybe 3 king-size beds together, they put a little heating pad in 2 corners. And then they put the food in the middle every day. And the tortoises, when I went there, I would always take pictures. They're all huddled on the heating pad because they're not hot enough to generate to eat, and so they weren't doing really well. And they were keeping them inside. They didn't have sunlight. Then they figured out to put them outside, which was good. Another step. I should even go back. They were incubating them by putting them in sand that were in lava rock enclosures outside with a wooden door, and they just put them in the sand. That area is the coldest part of Santa Cruz Island because of the wind movement there. Nobody would do that as anybody who's successful in breeding tortoises.
Yeah, yeah.
But they weren't really, that wasn't their thing. These
Yeah.
were scientists that were learning and trying to deal with, whatever. They just didn't have the knowledge base there. So then when they started getting it, they moved the babies outside. They had problem with rats, so they put screening over it and enclosures, and they started doing a lot better. They also were, Walter Allen paid for a very, very expensive incubator because they thought the incubators were their problem, because they really just put them outside.
Yeah.
And so they put them inside, and they wound up incubating by using a hair dryer, because his incubator
Yeah, I've
broke
seen
down.
pictures of this.
Yeah, it broke down, and they didn't have money to get replacement parts for it, because it was some sophisticated incubator from some place in who knows where, maybe in the States. But they set up this blow dryer with a thermostat in a little closet, and then they started getting hatchlings hatching out inside rather than outside, because they could control the temperature.
Yeah.
And then they put them outside, and so they did a lot better. So that was the thing I found disconcerting when I first went,
Yeah.
because I felt like, that's something that's not going to work. And they didn't have good hatching rates. Now they're hatching over 90%,
Yeah.
and they're mass producing them. I mean,
Wow.
they're releasing 300. Well, I was there. They were getting ready to release them. Now they're released 300 Floriana babies that they've raised up. They put them up to a size. They used to do it volleyball size, but it's even a little bit smaller than that. Because then they're sort of rat proof and nothing's going to bother them that's on the islands. But they released 300 of them onto Floriana just this year,
Wow.
and they were thought to be extinct in 1850. So they're doing fantastic stuff
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And so I just feel like, the hobbyists have found out ways by making mistakes, but moving on faster with working with fewer animals and that kind of thing, not having other responsibilities, because they got responsibilities for all different animals on all these different islands.
Yeah.
So there's 16 main islands, but then there's another 100 small islets there. So crazy dynamic. But I think I think they're doing great now. I really think it's something that they should be proud of. People should support. Galapagos Conservancy is doing a fantastic job. I am not independently wealthy, but I give every month, and because they deserve it. The wardens work their butts off. It's very, very hard work.
When I got to go there a couple years ago, I was really impressed by just getting a taste of all that and seeing everything that they were doing, and the level of dedication and competence they have, at least nowadays, is amazing. And I didn't know about the Floriana tortoises just getting released.
Yeah.
That's new. That's news to me.
Yeah, and it's new because now they have helicopters out
Yeah,
there. One
yeah,
of the big
yeah.
issues is, when Cord Offerman and the three veterinarians, Joe Flanagan from Houston Zoo, Cord Offerman from Austin, Texas, and is it time for me to say anything about Cord? No. Okay. I won't say anything about him. And Paul Gibbons, who was with Galapagos Conservancy, but he now lives either in Oregon or Washington State.
I think Oregon. Yeah.
Oregon. And the three of them went out there and took tissue samples and blood samples of tortoises, hybrid tortoises on Volcan Wolf,
Yep.
the biggest volcano on the biggest island. And they knew that there shouldn't be saddlebacks on there.
Yeah.
And there were. And so
Thanks,
it turns out, they found out that they had animals with Pinta genes in them,
Yep.
and Floriana genes, and they've been backbreeding them since 2015.
Yeah.
So
Is there actually consensus on how close they are to the original? Because I knew it was.
no, yeah. I mean, they were saying. I think that they've basically said within 100 years they feel like they'd be, as close as they're going to get, which would be probably more than 80%, maybe 90%.
Interesting.
But I think I don't know how they're doing it, what they've decided to do with these 300, but I know they had some animals that were 50%. So that means that they're, for a long time, they're 100% either Floriana or Pinta that were up there, but I think it was Floriana. So, and they've been labeling it. There's like 6,000 tortoises on that volcano, and they've only, I don't know what the status is now, but in 2015 they had taken blood and tissue samples from about 1,600. It seemed like they had potential.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Fantasticus, the Fernandina tortoise, prior to the discovery of that. If you thought there were actually tortoises there.
It's a good one.
yeah, I never been on the other side of Fernandina. They only have the one visitor site. They don't let anybody go on the other side where there was potential, but it just was so stark. It just didn't seem feasible to me. I think somebody would have found them, but we didn't have drones until recently, and you don't have somebody like Discovery Channel putting up $1 million for an expedition. I think now they've been pretty thorough in looking in areas where there's some vegetation and some scats. I don't know that they're going to find another one, but they'll still try. I think they were really trying real hard for a while, and now they sort of backed off because they got a lot of big issues to deal with, and besides tortoises, the same wardens have to work with. There's just stuff with penguins and just a lot of different organisms that need help. So, but that's again, with their budget and staff, they do phenomenal work.
I mean, reading into like the history of that island, there was the one male that Rollo Beck took in 1906, and just like a handful of other observations of scat and chewed on cacti, and like from what I remember, no other individuals seen at all until the 2019, until when they found that female.
Right.
But that's been 5 years now, so there's been no luck, and it seems like I have to give up at some point, or can only put so much time and effort into it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
If the species is just has no habitat and is just kind of naturally going extinct, or wouldn't have thrived.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's a huge island.
Yeah.
And it's mostly lava, a lot of it lava, which tears up your boots.
Yep.
The drones help, but I think that's the way it is. I think that they're saying, risk benefit is the risk is a lot higher, but I don't know. As we keep going, if somebody comes up with an idea, you see a lot of people doing things with drones now, even in our meetings. Here, I don't know the answer. I think there's a great book Matt James wrote on called Collecting Evolution, which is the Rollo Beck. Immediately when you found the tortoise, he butchered it.
Yep, I remember reading that.
That's what collecting was like then, and that animal's in Cal Academy.
Have you seen the specimen of that one?
I did with Peter.
Yeah.
And I think it was the time that IHS was in Seattle. Oh no, it wouldn't have been. We were in San Francisco. What were we doing there? Well, anyway, I did see it, and
Looking at the photos of that animal, it looks very similar to Hodensis, like how extremely saddlebacked it is, but kind of slightly different. Did you notice anything distinct about it, or it just looked like an extremely saddlebacked male?
It's sort of like when you freeze dry something, or you just let it sit. It kind of hard to get a good feel for it. It wasn't like they freeze dried it or lyophilized it like they do with some things like Hankins and what's the university there? Loma Linda. Anyway, he has a museum there. He does everything that way, but even whippersnappers and Komodo dragons, but they weren't preserved that way. And it's kind of hard to tell. I would say it looked pretty much like them.
Yeah, that's what was interesting. It was such a perfect looking tortoise too. I remember, like, at least the carapace with the beautiful flaring and everything. But the female from 2019 wasn't really particularly saddleback. She was she was small, but there wasn't much of like a constriction in her nuchal region that you'd expect. But there's so much variation that we only have 2 individuals. So like, what can you really say?
Not a lot of vegetation for her to live off of.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wouldn't be good for major growth. But she's not very big.
I would really hope that they could find more over time, or even just they could get a hold of a male and produce some offspring. But I mean, they have other priorities, and I remember seeing recently there was a better estimate for the Alcedo population of tortoises.
Oh, for sure.
It's put them at like the number up to around 10 to 15,000.
Is that right?
So, yeah, that was like a year or 2 ago, and when they did more thorough surveys. So that's a significant population. Like, that's bigger than any of the others in the Galapagos.
It has been. When I was on Alcedo,
that is awesome. That is incredible.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, when do we go up? Dave Drieski was with me and his dad. Trying to remember the year. Oh, it was 1991, and those are huge animals, huge, and it's the caldera is 4 miles in diameter.
Yeah,
kind of big place, but and a tough hike, but I think that population is in good shape.
Yeah.
The biggest issue is the goats are gone.
Yeah.
And that there were 120,000 goats on that volcano in 1993, and eating everything. And besides the food for the tortoises, took away shade.
Yeah.
So that was actually it's kind of an interesting thing for me. That was the first listserv I was ever on. That's what they called them then when the computers started. And it was in 1993. They had 178 scientists get on and interact together on a computer to strategize on what they could do to get rid of the goats on Alcedo. And somebody says, I think we should look into these New Zealand goat hunters. And I'm thinking, the heck? I'm thinking, I learned a lot. I mean, I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. The first time I'm on a group thing on a computer, I got my little box Apple that, the university gave us, and you used to have to do floppy disks in it. And, you got, what was it, 250K or something in it, just no memory. Yeah. And we're all communicating, and that was incredible what they did. And then all these gun clubs. There was a gun club in the U.S. and one in Germany that volunteered. They were going to go in there, hike in, and shoot all the goats. And I guess the 2 expeditions, 2 guys had heart attacks, and then they called that off because I climbed to the rim. I didn't even go down inside.
Oh my God.
I stayed overnight on the rim. You got to carry all your water and everything you need with you.
Yeah.
Now they have a station up there where they store water, but still.
And that's by helicopter they get there, right?
Yep. It's very, very different. Yeah. So, but I mean, that whole concept of, getting the Judas goats.
The Judas goats.
They have collars on, so the guys in the helicopters don't shoot those, and then they pump them through of hormones, pheromones, so they get into heat, and it attracts all the others, and then they just come around and shoot around each one of them. I think they had maybe 10 or 12 of them, and just they got rid of 120,000 goats.
Footage from helicopters of like them just gunning down all the goats.
Well, they were worried too because Galapagos hawks, they were afraid they were going to eat the lead, get lead poisoning from bullets, so they used special bullets, and it was just really unbelievable operation. And but then just think of all the rotting goats. And goat is pretty traditional there. In the 90s when I went there, the captain, whenever you docked on an island, the captain, first thing he'd do is get off and run ahead with a rifle and shoot a goat and bring it back for the cook, because goat stew is traditional in Galapagos. So,
Yeah.
so they got some traditions they needed to get rid of, but anyway.
It's kind of more of a random question, but like, how many of the different tortoise populations have you seen in the wild?
Wow.
In the
Well, I saw
Galapagos? Yeah.
Lonesome George. Does that count?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
yeah, none of us
let me
can
see.
ever count that. So
Yeah, I mean, I saw him 6 months before he died. I was with Peter in 2012,
Oh, wow.
January.
Wow.
Yeah. Let me see. I don't know. If you count. I mean, well, Pinzone's unique.
yeah,
Everywhere there's tortoises, I've been, I think. But you know, and now some places where now they're putting Hudensis onto Santa Fe.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we'd always look for tortoises, but there were
Nothing there.
Nothing. So, but you know, the rest of them, I guess I've seen.
Did you ever make it to Pinta? Even though-
No. Now, Peter,
Peter
it's
did.
it's 100 miles north of the northernmost island, so it's like really way out, and they didn't allow. But actually, Peter did, and he got a group. I have a picture at home, a picture of 23 wardens. He got permission to do a final search of Pinta to see
Yeah.
if they could find anything, and they found bones of I think 19 animals. I think they were all male. At the end, it was just all males, and they had fallen into crevasses. Yeah, and that's also an issue on Fernandina. Some of the area, there's places for tortoises to fall. So, especially if it's looking for vegetation
Yeah.
anywhere. So.
like reading a lot of like Peter's works and stuff, there was like kind of a like opposite stories with Espanola tortoises and Pinta tortoises. You got down to where Lonesome George was the last individual and he was a male, but before that it was still mostly males. Like even the early 1900s, there was only one like female tortoise that was collected. I think it was for Rothschild, but it was also by Rolobeck. But versus Hudensis, it was mostly females, which made repatriation and breeding them way easier. Even if they did have, if you flipped that ratio and you had 2 or 3 females and then a dozen males, like that's going to be a lot harder to build a population back.
I agree, and it sort of isn't logical either, because they're bigger animals. The males are
Yeah.
much bigger than the females, and you would think that the females. The only thing I could say is with the saddle-backed animals, their food sources are mainly cactus pads.
Yeah,
So if you could reach higher,
yeah,
you got better chance at food. The females got to wait till something really falls off.
yeah, yeah.
And so the males could beat them to it. I guess that would be the only thing I think of logically. But
Peter had a thought. I think this was one of Peter's works, but about the nesting grounds on Pinta being located more closer to the coast and easy to access. So the way back in the 1800s, when like the collectors were taking a lot of them, it would have been easiest to get the females because they'd have been in the lowlands, rather than on Espanola. The nesting grounds were not as accessible. So even a large male like saddleback is not going to be massive. Like a single person could carry one. So,
Right.
but a female's like perfect size, like a 60-pound tortoise or whatever.
Yeah.
You could easily make off with that.
Well, they really went to the easiest islands.
Yeah.
After a while, they figured it out, and the ones that have the smallest tortoises is what you want,
Yeah.
because you get some of those big males.
Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
500
you
pounds.
see them. They
700
take
pound
logs.
tortoise.
Yeah, 2 logs and strap them to the logs, and you need at least 4 really strong people, maybe more.
Carrying
Carrying
You got to
them
carry it
off.
over rough terrain, and yeah, those dome tortoises were often they're in the higher elevation areas that were harder to get to as well. So like, it's such a shame because the saddleback tortoises are so unique and just the most amazing animals on the planet, like in my opinion. And now there's very few of them left compared to even the dome tortoises. I mean, Espanola, they've produced thousands of them, but it's nothing like Alcedo, or it's not like a virgin population that's never been messed with. It's
Well,
like,
San Cristobal is going to be a little
Yeah.
bit unique. It's not as quite as exaggerated as Saddleback, but
Yeah,
it is a
it's like-
Saddleback.
yeah,
And This is kind of interesting, is Peter would do this with students. He'd say he want to go into San Cristobal, and this is a way we do that. We'd hike in 3.5 miles, and there was a dry lake bed, and that's where all the tortoises hung out. But the wardens weren't going there. I mean, they finally did a full survey of San Cristobal, and there's over 6,000 tortoises on the island. But
Yeah.
nobody's in the area. Nobody went to that area. And in fact, now they're going through this. It's a different
Yeah.
animal. The one that they have as the type
It's from a different area.
It was found in a cave, and they thought they'd be the same, and they're different.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a new species
Yeah.
that they're going to be naming, but there's a lot of them, and they're kind of cool. They got a saddleback, but
Yeah.
nothing's as pronounced as Espanola.
Yeah. That's the.
I mean, even Pinzone is kind of a, it's sort of, I don't know what
They get that crazy
tunnel.
like the dip, like the old original ones would get. Like
Yeah,
the pronounced, but it
yeah.
doesn't. They never seem to have, at least from the photos, they don't seem to have the same kind of flaring that the Hodensis will get. Like the marginal flaring just goes very extreme.
Yeah, there's some in the posterior, but
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. This is another thing we could think about is when they started bringing eggs into Darwin
Yeah.
Station of Pinzone animals, the animals that would hatch out and
Yeah.
grow out were much
Much
bigger. And that's the thing, I've got a picture of Peter in the enclosure with him with Wacho, and here's a repatriated animal that's like 120 kilos, and then you have the old ones
Yeah.
that are 90, and it's like, why would they be bigger? And maybe just better fed, but that's a significant increase in size.
It's probably a lot of phenotypic plasticity. If they're coming from an island or a habitat that's so dry and it's just so unproductive, they're just scraping by to survive their whole life. They just probably could never get that large. So those captive ones, even though they even have a bulkier shell, like they're wider, they don't have as much of a, they don't look as impressive as the older ones do. But a lot of that is the age and the character that comes with.
It's a different type of impressive.
Yeah,
That's what-
it's.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's impressive how different they are just because of the diet. Like
That's what I think it's got to be. I mean, we've had that. I don't know if you saw the picture. Did you get to see them?
I didn't get to see any. When I went there, I got they don't even have the Hodensis aren't in the breeding center anymore because they repatriated them.
Right.
And I did on Isabella. I got to see the Aplastados and like all of them.
Right.
But I didn't see any truce. The only saddlebacks I saw were a couple hybrids they had, and they had a group of Florianos that they were breeding. But
Right.
no Duncanensis.
They
I've just seen
get-
carapaces of them in museums and in Pritchard's collection. But
Okay, I have some pictures, but were you able to see Pinzone Island animals on exhibit when you went?
no,
there?
I don't. They didn't
They
have
were
any.
off, but they're there. I think they were going to bring them back, but I think it was like, I don't know, they wanted more space for everything else Floriana, but now that they can use helicopters, they may not. I don't know what they did with them, but there was a whole group.
I know they were there until the 2010s at least, if they're still there.
Oh yeah, no,
I was
they were
really hoping
past
they'd
that.
be on display because that's what I wanted to see the most. But
No, I will. Yeah, I get special kind of double secret handshake to go into that area. But
Yeah.
when you get Peter, it's a little bit different. So
yeah.
unfortunately, we don't have Peter anymore. But yeah, so
Yeah, I mean, something maybe to round out the Galapagos discussion, we can talk a little bit about some of your other adventures. But and now at Chapman, you help lead a course, Darwin to Galapagos, the interterm, it's
Travel
like a
course.
study abroad sort of thing.
right.
And, you've done that a lot, and I actually had the opportunity to go to the San Diego Zoo and interact with the tortoises, kind of a smaller scale captive setting, but it was cool to see all the students interacting with them, and maybe people that don't know a lot about tortoises really having a good time. And just curious if there are moments that stand out in your mind from leading that course and seeing students interact with the tortoises that are inspiring.
Yeah, the tortoises the students that you went with we were there. They're actually in a different course. They're in a course that I teach, an honors course, and well, the title, I didn't pick it, but the head of honors said he wanted me to teach discussion. They wanted discussion-based courses, small number of students, 15, and they wanted Darwin's theory of evolution, the science, and the controversy. And I said to the head of honors, I said, I'm a scientist. There is no controversy. Well, they said, well, can you make it a little bit, So anyway, so it is, and actually we go through all these things, but that's the group I take. Turns out some of the students who have gone with me to Galapagos join us in the last few years and go. And so I don't know when you went, if any of those, usually they just show up on their own. So there were probably a few of them. So we got a combination. But the thing that's, especially with the honor students to me, because very few of them are science majors,
Interesting. Yeah.
it's really how excited they get about conservation and just animals in general. So I think what you guys are doing with the podcast is great, and I think any way we can bridge and make people, you're willing to support anything you appreciate and like, and that's a lot of people want to get rid of zoos, and I get it from the days when it was postage stamp collecting, but zoos have an edict to do things differently now, and maybe some people break the rules, but I think overall the mission and some of the things they're doing in country are great, and I think the fact that they're getting the public excited about seeing animals that they wouldn't normally see, and maybe that's going to help us preserve them, I think, and not that they're all going to be in zoos, but that maybe we need to keep habitat for them too. But I've noticed, especially maybe it's just the honor students, but the students I take there seem to be excited. My teaching evaluations couldn't be any better, and it's because of the zoo trip. It's nothing I say in class. Yeah, they love feeding them. It's like, I'm thinking, these are 21-year-olds, and they're getting excited about giving romaine lettuce to a giant tortoise, and they go in there with their phones and they're going crazy. The only thing I have to worry about is somebody not paying attention. I had a girl one year came in a flowered dress, really colorful, and I didn't really think about it until I'm looking up. We're in the enclosure with all these, there's 50 people walking around, and I look over, and here's this tortoise about to take her dress off. It's reaching out, coming from behind her. There's no way, if that thing bit into it, that she was going to keep that. But anyway, I just yelled out, and she got out of the way. And now, since then, I always tell them, wear closed-toed shoes, don't have colorful nail polish, don't, and just don't stick your fingers in the mouth of a giant tortoise.
Pretty good precautions. Yeah. It's good to talk and highlight just that, zoos have an interesting role now. It's kind of different than just showing animals. A lot of that money goes back into on-the-ground work, supporting groups like the Galapagos Conservancy and the people on the ground. And it's good, as you highlighted, I think, really pertinent to just, again, reiterate the amount of work that goes in on the ground there, the thousands of tortoises that have been reared and released, and all the adults have been saved, the eradication programs, and the list goes on and on. And so it's really inspiring to hear a lot about that. One of your other, in talking with Cord a little, he gave me some things to talk about. He had mentioned that that you'd been out on an expedition with Steve Irwin, and that in pursuit of turtles there. I'm just curious what that was like. And
wow, yeah. So I am kind of a weird guy, I guess. Peter actually, with the Second World Congress of Herpetology, he was going to go with Walter and I to it, and it was going to be in Adelaide. Well, it was in Adelaide and Australia, and he lined up for us to visit John Cann and maybe go bush with John Cann, and then we were going to go to Perth to see Gerald Cookling, Demidura and all that. And then he had this expedition that he had lined up for us to go to Crab Island, which is an island north of Queensland, in which flatback sea turtles nest. Well, it turns out Sybil became ill and Peter canceled out. He had to, and that's good, and she's doing fine now, I guess. But we were sort of on our own, and then John Can couldn't get off work to go there, but he set up for a guide to take Walter and I into Queensland, and it was unbelievable trip. We were in every river north of Sydney, snorkeling for turtles. That's the way John Kane catches them, and I was fit enough then to do it. And then we got up to Queensland, and there's this, in Beerwah, at that time it was the Queensland Fauna and Reptile Park, which became Zoo Australia that you guys would know at your age. But it was just a roadside stand, but they had a Galapagos tortoise. And Steve Irwin's dad owned it, but he was running it at the time, and he wasn't, no TV, he was, he was just this guy. And he wanted to meet Walter because Walter had Galapagos tortoises, and we met with him and spent time. And then he says, he'll take me snorkeling for snake-neck turtles. So we didn't see any snake-neck turtles, but I did snorkel with him, and I saw the platypus. And he did have the khakis on, and he was married, he had no kids then. John Ken got along with him really well. I mean, he was a fantastic wife. Terry was great. He was just the way you see on TV, high energy, great guy. He wanted to know everything about Galapagos tortoises. And it was just great to see what happened. Now, most of the Australians were thinking he was over the top. They didn't like his TV show, which I thought for kids it's great. I mean, I get street cred on my campus when I tell people I snorkel with a crocodile hunter. That worked for me, I mean, now I guess maybe they're too young. They don't even know who he is anymore. But yeah, so I did snorkel with Steve Irwin. Didn't catch anything. Got to see him feeding saltwater crocs from a bridge over an enclosure in which he would hold chickens out. And this thing would come out of the water, I mean, he didn't have everybody talk about 17 footers, but he didn't have a 17. I don't know how big it was, but it definitely could do a number on you. But they stopped that because apparently some woman, they were competing, started in another reptile park to do that, and a croc tore her arm right out of the socket. Yeah, he missed the chicken. So, but yeah, so that was good. But we were. The other thing was, in that trip, I met Arthur Georges too, who's and he and Gerald have both come and stayed with me, and I stayed with them. But Arthur said, "You can't go to Crab Island." He says, they won't. And Peter's all set. We're going to go to Crab Island. He says, well, the Aboriginals now have control. You have to get the elders to approve anything. And he says, you don't want to do that anyway because you fall asleep. He says the crocs are going to come up and get you before you see any sea turtles. And I said, there's crocs there? He says, what, are you kidding? So it was like, again, one of these Peter adventures that, thank goodness, never happened. But Peter's is special. But that's what Cord's talking about, I'm sure. But yeah, and he's I tried to get him to go with Grayson to the Galapagos with me. That would have been great. Although I'm not sure I want to travel with Cord anymore. Yeah, he's getting grumpy. He's old. He's not as fit as he used to be.
Fighting words. Yeah.
I had to put that in there. He might listen to this. At least Grayson will listen to it.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, we'll make sure of it. Well, yeah, that's really interesting. I guess to kind of round things out, maybe it's especially pertinent to this is, I mean, right now we're at the TSA TFTSG's meeting. That's the annual turtle meeting, and pretty early on, I think in 1991, at Chapman, you were really integral to assembling one of the first
1990, August 1990.
if not the first turtle research conservation symposium. I'm
Yeah.
curious what went into that. How did that? Where did the idea come from? And,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So, it was 1990, and it was kind of interesting because I think the New York Turtle and Tortoise Society got upset with us, and 2 years later they came out with a similar. They call theirs the first International Turtle and Tortoise Society Symposium. But anyway, it's no big. But Walter Allen wanted to do it. I was thinking, well, it'd be a good thing to do on a Chapman campus. You know, the summers, they're looking for conferences. And, you know, I interacted with a lot of zoo people then. Dave Collins, Jim Murphy was at Dallas, and Sean McEwen was at Honolulu. And I floated the idea of having a conference on campus, and they all thought it was a great idea. And Kent Beeman, who is a faculty, well, he's consultant now, but he had been to Galapagos when he was at Loma Linda. He was inside El Cedo volcano for 2 weeks, and they were collecting water with, you know, just all kinds of stuff. But anyway, he wanted to do it, and he's really a reptile guy too, and he worked for Walter Allen at that time. So basically, the three of us worked on it for 9 months. It was a lot of work, but it worked out really well because so many people wanted to speak. And Peter, at that time, was introducing the first segment of the Turtle Planet, which he showed it at the beginning. That was the first thing. And, you know, he wanted to sell it to BBC. He wanted to do 6 parts. And he did a second part on side-neck turtles. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but
Seen clips of it.
yeah, so, and with John Cannon, that was another thing, snorkeling with John Cannon on Fraser Island. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I've heard
I
about
was
that.
catching Fraser Island snake-neck turtles, and it's like, I thought I was, you know, in a place where there's no crocs,
That's awesome.
and, yeah, I mean, white sand to the bottom, and, just one of the highlights of my life. But anyway, with that conference, all these people came, and it was great. I mean, we had, at that time, which was a big deal, 300 turtle hobbyists and zoo people and academics.
Wow.
John Baylor was there from Bronx. I could have to look at the proceedings. I can give you a copy of the proceedings. I think I have a couple left.
That'd be
I
awesome.
don't, yeah. But Dwayne Meyer talked on Burmese mountain tortoises because they had them at the Honolulu Zoo. I mean, we had people from everywhere. It was really fun meeting just to have 300 turtle people all together. And what the California Turtle Club did, I let them have the gym, and they set up open to the public. Like 5,000 people came in. They had turtles and everything. And we had from, what's the school? Cal Poly Pomona. They brought rattlesnakes, which, they had. I don't know why the school let me do that one. But anyway, it was quite a meeting to have 300 at that time, because the first TSAs couldn't get 300, and now it's become a mushroom cloud because of young guys like you passing it on. It's great. Yeah, I think TSA is in good hands now. I mean, it was, but it there was rough growth, I think, in general. But I guess it's starting any organization. You got to expect it, and they've done fantastic. I'm real pleased with the meeting this year. I've been pleased every time I've come just to interact with people, and that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know what else to say. I got to say something bad about Cord, though.
Something else
Oh,
to rub
no.
salt in the
I
wound.
do have one Cord story.
Okay,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Cord, besides being Cord, is a fantastic cyclist, or he was.
Right, right.
He says he's a nice guy, even though he comes from Long Island, which doesn't raise nice guys. But he was in a bike race in Dallas that Lance Armstrong won. Cord came in fourth.
Oh, shoot.
We're talking high end stuff, right? And he said, I can't repeat it because this is tape, but he said that blankety blank blank. He said he was using drugs, and if he wasn't there, I would have gotten a trophy and been on the podium because he would have come in third. So but anyway, that's my other Cord story. But
That's a good one.
yeah, and most people don't know that he was a good cyclist. I don't know how he has time for it, to be honest, and to train in Austin, Texas. No, but anyway, that's all. I don't have anything else.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, I mean, this has been great.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
In terms of just if there's any other, there's so many stories with Dr. Pritchard, but I don't know if there's anything else that stands out. You know?
Wow, that I could repeat. No, I think that one of the important things, and I see this with the leadership at TSA, the new guy, and Jeff, the sea turtle guy, and I told them that, but, and Peter is the same way. He's very engaging with anybody he interacted with. I had a student who was, you guys are too young to know, Gordon and Sheila McRae were famous actors, and they were in a movie called Oklahoma that was like a musical. Their daughter was a star on Petticoat Junction, which is probably before your time.
I've heard of that, but I
Okay.
couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah, the last name's McRae. Their granddaughter went with me to Galapagos, one of the early trips. But she was at Chapman mainly because parents could afford it and paid. She wasn't necessarily the best student, but Peter would spend time with her, with anybody else. He could talk. He's talking with Oscar Arias, the president of Costa Rica, and his wife, and then he's talking to students who really just probably didn't belong in the class, and that's just the way he is. I mean, he's a motivator. He's patient. He's the smartest person I've ever known, but he didn't overstep that. He didn't look down on people. I never saw that, and I would say those same properties are in some of the leadership we have now. So I really like Jeff, the sea turtle guy.
Yeah.
And he lives in San Diego, so I might have to visit him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I guess just as a concluding few questions, kind of feeds into what you were saying, but just having been involved with the history of turtle conservation and such for so long, I mean, where do you see the future going? You've kind of hinted at that, but what's kind of the future direction?
Wow. Well, young people are going to have to do some things, but I mean, hopefully it's in good hands. I think there are more people that are interested in doing something. The business of how people really, how do I say it? Any place you have people, you have problems. And you know, I don't know if there are enough of us people to fend off those problem makers, but I think we have some really good core of people trying, and there's much better science going on. There's better ability to make decisions. I think AI, Jack Horner, my colleague, the dinosaur guy who you met, he's saying AI is like, you know, he looks at it as really positive. I worry about people cheating in class, but he, you know, he's talking like, you know, it's just going to be a short period of time. We're going to be talking to whales. He says they're building up vocabularies, and you know, these animals interact, and so try to be optimistic. I think that there's more people who are doing it the right way and concerned than there. I think I remember it was more or less just hobbyists just doing their own thing. Now there's groups of people trying to genuinely preserve the organisms, and that's the cool part to me. Is quite a legacy, and you guys are an important part of that for sure. I think that part's very, very exciting. So I'm hopeful.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's kind of our last thing. It's just as students for us and a lot of people listening. I'm curious what one piece or what advice you would give to someone looking to make turtle work a career.
Wow. Okay. So here's my advice I give to all students, even food science students, and see if it fits. We can modify it. I tell people, if you want to be successful and happy, don't do it for money. I said, as long as it's safe, moral, not against the law, follow your passion. If your passion, whatever it is legal, moral, you'll be a happy person. And if turtles are it, great. I'm happy. And I got lucky in my job to have enough flexibility and find a way. Chapman was starting environmental science, but they didn't want to hire anybody. They just wanted to see if it would float. They asked for people to offer a course in environmental science. And I had just been with Peter to Galapagos, so I pitched a travel course to go to Galapagos. How lucky am I? I'm getting paid to go to the Galapagos Islands. And so I think, it's like, not that I'm independently wealthy, but I feel like I've had a genuinely good career, and I'm happy, and I follow that same rule for myself, and I tell all my students that, the ones that are in food science or anything, and I'd say that's the same thing for turtle biologists.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll take that to heart.
Yeah.
So thank you. I mean, I want to turn the floor over to you if there's ever anything we haven't covered, and
Wow.
just anything.
No, I think I'm worried it's going to be too long. Nobody will listen.
We found one's like 3 times longer than
Oh,
this, so-
really?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
well,
God.
This is
Wow.
not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any good jokes. No, let me see. No, but no, I think that's it. I'm excited for you guys. I think there are opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it could be rewarding. And as long as you're happy, just like I said. I think if you think money is going to make you happy, that's a mistake. I have a lot of rich kids that come to a private university, and being rich sometimes is a detriment because they go down the wrong path. They don't work. They don't follow their passion. They just, because they have a lot of money, do things that take them down the wrong road. So, I think you guys are set the right direction. Keep going. And if you get out of turtles, you can get into something else, but follow the same rules. And that's what happened for me, I guess, too. I could say that. Couldn't get into vet school, so I had to look for another way to go, and it's worked out. So
That's awesome. Well, we like to end everything off on the joke line of things with some turtle trivia.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've got some random turtle facts you want to throw at us, or we can throw some at you, or however you want to do it.
Wow. You throw some at me. I don't know that I have anything left in the tank. Let me see. What a turtle trivia. I have a lot of trivia, but it's not going to be funny.
Alex, Jason, you guys got some turtle questions, Santa Fe questions, something?
I got something.
All right.
You may know this. It's not anything crazy, but what happened to Onan's remains after he died?
They buried him right there.
Yep.
Linda Coyote, I asked her that specifically, and Peter was upset with that.
Oh, I bet.
They wanted, I mean, again, well, I mean, you can get a lot from tissue samples, etc. There's a
Yeah.
lot of information there, and I think people from earlier years weren't enlightened in that in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and Peter was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He would bring shells that we would find if a 3.5 mile hike. He'd bring them back to the Jarwin station, and he'd say they weren't doing anything with them, you know. But
Oh, yeah.
I think now everybody's, you know, you got that whole Yale group is doing an unbelievable job with the DNA stuff,
Yeah.
with tortoise management. It's great. So, yeah. So that's, I think that's good.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. And
Yeah.
thank you again. This has been an awesome conversation, and I'm glad we could sit down and do this.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of reliving that dinghy of doom again. Is keeps me alive.
Yeah.
Could be the best title of anything paper I ever had. Yeah. So Peter liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Maybe we'll title when this is available, that's something with Dinghy of Doom in it. I kind of
man.
like that.
The Dinghy of Doom.
Well, you know, I do have that presentation, and that's what when I'm retired, if people give me a business class flight, I give that presentation somewhere, and I'll have the slides, and they could see the Dinghy of Doom.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
we can kind of end off there, but thanks again, and we'll
Thanks.
see everyone in the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, yep.